So I did something in my own game which saw my handicap plummet, like massive change. Probably, from my recollection, the biggest change I had in my handicap. And I'm going to share with you what it was, and it really helped me hit my irons much more crisp, much more flush, just like that one. And in this video, we're going to show you how thinking about or using Happy Gilmore's technique.
The price is wrong,
Actually makes a lot of sense and it can help you. I found myself, practicing a lot. We're talking about when I was probably 16, 17 year, and I was probably, trying to get down to that sort of really low level. And I find myself in practice kind of struggling with strike a little bit with the irons. I'd often hit them a little bit thin. My ball flight tended to be a little bit on the high side. I made one little change and suddenly started to get much better ball flights, much better compression on the golf ball, hit the center of the club more often. I remember at the time thinking, this can't be right, this is a fault, I'm not doing the right thing. I now learn that was the right thing to do, and I'm going to share it with you. So my swing thought was, as I transitioned from backswing to downswing, I basically got my sternum to move down and forwards. So I moved it down and forwards. Now, because my sternum was moving down and forwards, my lead shoulder was also moving down and forwards. And if you look at my head a little bit, that was also moving down and forwards. Now, throughout this video, I'll probably exaggerate that move a little bit, just so it's more visible to see. The reality is it wasn't that extreme. It felt like it at the time. As I was doing that, I remember thinking to myself, well, that can't be right, because you've got to keep your head still. And I'd keep going back to swings where my swing thought was, in transition, keep my head super still. And every time I did that, I'd just go back to those high, weak ball flights without particularly good compression. So I thought to myself, well, I'm just going to keep doing the wrong thing. I'm going to keep moving myself down and forwards. And I started to play some better golf. My handicap started to really plummet. And I got down pretty close to scratching in a relatively short space of time over that summer. So now we look at the greats. You look at Tiger, you look at some of those golfers now, they absolutely make that movement. And now I understand more about the golf swing, I understand why that was beneficial to me. If I took a setup to this golf ball and I just moved the golf club towards the target, my golf club moves up away from the ground. Now I know that to strike this ball really well, I want to be hitting ball and I want to be hitting the ground after. I need my club to be going down lower than the level of the ground. That's how we take divots. So how do I get to the point where my swing or my club is going to go underground? Well, in transition, I've got to move myself forward and down. Because I make that little movement, now as I come down, guess what? The ground gets in the way. Now my club is trying to go underneath the ground. It won't do because I haven't got enough speed here, but it was that little movement, that kind of forward and down, that really helps me get my club underground. So if I was to take my setup with a 6-iron and make that little movement at setup, so head's going to go forward and down, from there, look at the strike I'm able to achieve. Look at the divot that I'm able to take. Look at the ball flight I was able to achieve. If I do that same little drill, but from here, don't move my head at all, well, that strike was terrible. I actually landed the club way before the ground. So I didn't do anything in that technique that was sort of saying that my club is going to move down and underground. So I would actually really encourage those of you out there who feel like you need a little bit more help with the irons to, in transition, don't be afraid to feel like you're moving down and in front of the golf ball. Now, how's Happy Gilmore going to help with this? Well, there's another little kind of point to this exercise which really helped me actually gain a little bit more club head speed. And it was the feeling of hitting the brakes. So I always had the sensation that when I made that move in transition, this kind of forward and down movement, that I didn't really want to continue that too far. So I always felt that I was sort of up, forward and down, and then almost pushing back against that movement, kind of hitting the brakes with my body. And if you think about that, again, I'm going to exaggerate these movements. It was from transition, it was a movement down towards the target and then hitting the brakes and stopping. I'm sure you've watched Happy Gilmore movie, okay? So what does he do? He starts here and he actually starts all his golf swing and he runs. So when he does that, what does he do as he plants that lead foot? Well, he would be making that movement. He would be, as he plants that lead foot, his head, his sternum would be in the process of going down and forwards. But what did he do then? He pushed up and around. And we've seen tests, we've seen studies where golfers are able to achieve more clubhead speed, more distance using the Happy Gilmore method. Normally with a driver, it's quite difficult when the ball's on the ground. But there's a reason for that. It's a mythical movie that doesn't really exist. It's not factual. But there are elements of it which do relate to the golf swing. If you can start to create a movement where there is a force going forward and down, and then you brace against that force, you start to kick the club head out. And when you start to kick the club head out, you start to generate more speed. So I'm going to put some slow motion videos on the screen throughout this video. I just want you to pay attention to my hat, the logo on my hat, and specifically the lead shoulder. The lead shoulder is key in all this because so many golfers that I've coached over the years from the top have the lead shoulder moving up far too quickly. Now watch what happens to my head when I do that. It's going to be forcing it up and away from the target. That is the complete opposite movement to what you need. If your shoulder moves up too soon, your contact with the ground will be non-existent, or if it is existent, it's going to be way back here. Let me hit a shot and I'll demonstrate for you, and this is not going to be a great result. I mean, I am using range balls here, so it does end up in that water, it's not too bad. But if my shoulder goes up super early, I mean, there's no ground contact. That is going to go in the water. It was completely thin. That hurt my hand a little bit. And it was almost impossible for me to get a good strike. But if I now go ahead and kind of think back to what I was doing when I was 15, 16 and actually feel like in transition I move forward and down, with any luck I should get a much better strike and a much better result. I mean, I cannot tell you how different that feels off the club face. That feels to me so easy to strike it. It feels so easy through the ball. It feels like the club has got so much more speed. I'm just going to do that once more because you will be wanting to search that feeling over and over and over once you get it. Forward and down, pull back. I cannot tell you how easy it feels to play golf that way with the irons. So, channel your Happy Gilmore. Don't be afraid to move forward and down. Get that lead shoulder moving in the right direction, you will start to crush the irons, and I'm sure you're going to get handicap drop as well.